Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining Project Learning Tree Canada and the Jasmar Group's New Ways to Attract Diverse Green Job Candidates. We're pleased to have you here with us today. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind you that at SFI, our vision is a world that values and benefits from sustainably managed forests. And that sustainably managed forests includes social issues, and social issues include the people you hire. And all of this work, I believe, is relevant to our mission. Project Learning Tree Canada is an initiative of SFI, and what we strive to do at Project Learning Tree Canada is to grow future forest leaders. And we've been doing that in a variety of ways over the last 2 years. And I'm pleased to say that over the course of 2 years, thanks in part to funding from the Government of Canada, we've placed youth in over 2,500 jobs in the forest and park sector. We've achieved gender balance in doing so. We've had about 12% Indigenous youth placed. We've started to do wraparound services and supports for youth in their career paths through launching a mentorship program. And we're also doing employer supports, which include the webinar series that we're on today. We already had our first series just a short while ago. And today's today's webinar, we're focused on new ways to attract diverse green job candidates. So how do you show up as an organization, as an employer in the job market? What are some of the tips and tricks that you can do? I'm so pleased that we have Sylvia here with us to help guide you through some of the tips and tricks and tips and practices. And we also have Zach Wegman, our Green Jobs coordinator, who's been working hard on our SFI network and our employer series. This is the second and fourth webinar, and we will also have 2 more after this one. One is once you've got the CVs and the folks in front of you doing interviews, how can you make better hiring decisions to promote diversity in your staffing, in your staff? And then finally, how do we create an inclusive culture for your green workplace? So this is a 4-part webinar series. Today we're on part 2. I'm also very pleased that both the Canadian Institute of Forestry and the Society of American Foresters are providing credits to members for attending these webinars. And so thank you if you're a CIF member or an SAF member for joining us here today. So now I'm going to pass it over to Sylvia and to start off our webinar.
That's great. Thanks very much, Kathy. I'm Sylvia Apostolides with the Jasmar Group. It's a pleasure to be here today for webinar number 2 of 4. What we want to do today, as Kathy mentioned, is really focus around attracting diverse candidates. We'll be looking at particularly around the job posting itself. How do we make that more inclusive so that we motivate diverse candidates to apply? And then also talking and providing some tips around your outreach strategies. Some of the things that we'll walk away with respect to your learning objectives will be around the importance of language and words. You know, while it may seem quite small and trivial, it's actually really quite powerful. The second thing that we'll be talking about is the importance of transparency. You know, how can we use transparency to increase application rates of diverse candidates? We'll also take a deeper dive into diversity statements. Do they work? When do they work? How do they work? How do you make sure that you can create diversity statements that are powerful and get to those diverse applicants? And then we'll be looking at those outreach strategies. How do we involve our communities more effectively so that we ensure that their needs are being met through the positions that we offer? So there's kind of the overview of today. Let's see if this goes forward. There we go. So just a quick recap from our first webinar, and also a little bit about us. We are a behavioral change consultancy. We're focused primarily around diversity and inclusion, and we help organizations build team belonging, culture, and performance. If some of you joined us for our first webinar, you'll know that we're really focused on behaviors. While awareness is a great first step, what we actually really want to do is focus on how do we help people to be more inclusive in their actions. And we leverage insights from behavioral science to do that. We're evidence-based. We go beyond, what we assume, just what sounds right works, to what actually the evidence points to. And that's where our foundation is. And the last bit is really around being human-centered or candidate-centered or employee-centered. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about our outreach strategies. How do we make sure, using a design thinking kind of approach, how do we use this approach to ensure that we're listening and we're involving our employees and our candidates so that we get to higher order solutions? Some of the takeaways from last time were this idea of small things, small changes actually make a big impact. We'll see some of that today. We design our processes with that, small changes, but also how do we help people to build more inclusive habits. And so that's kind of just a quick recap of last time, and also the foundation of what our organization is really all about. Today, what I want to talk about as far as another sort of foundational piece is is what we call BAM needs. So belonging, autonomy, and mastery. So there's 3 psychological needs that every human being needs, and that is belonging, autonomy, and mastery. So just like we need our physical needs met, such as water and food and shelter, we also need our psychological needs met. We advocate for building belonging, autonomy, and mastery, what I'm going to call BAM, into every single people process. And so that starts from when what we're doing today, which is outreach and attracting diverse candidates, right through the employee life cycle until when people leave our organization. So let's quickly go through what this actually means. So belonging is really around, am I connected? Do people care about me? Are people friendly? Am I close to my colleagues? Are my team members my friends? And we're all hardwired for belonging. It means that people feel welcomed, that they're connected, that they have positive relationships with others. Now we hear belonging and inclusion, and they're very similar. Belonging is really about how people feel. Inclusion is really around the inclusive processes that we're trying to create. We know that feelings of belonging lead to greater motivation and performance. So if you feel like you belong, you're going to be more motivated, and you're also going to perform a lot better as well. That's the first key need that we need to be considering when we look at all employees and all diverse employees as well, because our sense of belonging may be very different from other people's sense of belonging. The next one is really around control, autonomy. Will I have control? Am I empowered? Can I share my ideas? Is my opinion valued? Can I be myself? Feeling in control means showing your full authentic self with the culture. It means you don't have to cover or downplay who you are. It means that your voice is being heard. And this is a really important piece as well. The last one is mastery. Our candidates are looking for, can I build my skills? Will I learn? How will I feel like I'm competent? So will I be seen like I'm capable, that I'm achieving, that I can show my full potential? So we need to be communicating all of these things in all of our outreach strategies as we're looking to attract qualified and diverse candidates to our organization. So BAM, that's the word that we use. overriding all of this is this concept of fairness. Will I be treated fairly? So through all of this is we need to make sure that everyone feels like they have equal opportunity. Okay, so let's kind of go into the first tip, and that's really around language. So we had done some roundtables before as we sort of prepared for all of these webinars with some of the industry leaders. And one of the things that we heard was that gendered language in job descriptions is a challenge. So language matters when you describe your company's opportunity. And so without realizing it, we all speak it in and write in gendered language. Some language is more appealing for some people, like for women, and some for men. So if you are looking to increase the number of women in certain positions, then using masculine words like courage, opinion, persist will actually detract that. You want to be using either feminine words or neutral words. So what are those words? I've listed some of them here, here on this slide. You can also use a augmented writing platform like Gender Decoder. Another one is Textio, and another one is an organization called Applied. And you can actually run your job description through these to see whether or not you can strengthen your job posting by using more inclusive, sort of non-gendered language. Now, it doesn't really have anything to do with whether or not, like when you change from gendered to neutral language, it doesn't actually have anything to do with whether or not people will feel capable, but it actually has everything to do with whether or not people feel that they belong. So again, it comes back to that sort of feeling of belonging. The other thing is just to keep in mind here with those neutral words, it's not only that people will feel more belonging when you use the right language or neutral language, it's also that you're going to fill those positions a lot quicker, about 20% quicker as well. So that's another really positive thing about using the right language. Some more tips around content. You know, what we heard from organizations was that working really hard to create a culture of belonging, but they really wanted to effectively communicate this in their job postings. So how do we increase the number of qualified applicants and the number of diverse candidates simply by changing some of the language? Some tips for you to consider are using the active voice whenever possible. So, you know, you are or you will is more concise and it communicates autonomy. Passive sentences tend to be more confusing, tend to be more clunky. And remember, people hate ambiguity. The simpler, the more clarity, the better. And that's what active words are. They're simple, they're clear, and they also really play to our BAM needs. Instead of using we and you, or sorry, use we and you rather than the candidate and the applicant. So go back to your job postings and see, are we using the candidate or the applicant? And just switch it out. A small change of just you and we actually communicates more belonging. SFI's culture sentence gives us an example of using words like we and team to communicate these BAM feelings. We believe in creating an empowered and supportive team that is committed to enhancing the value of forests for our shared quality of life now and in the future. Small things, big difference. And the last thing, which is just an interesting evidence-based point, is how long should your job posting be so that you're actually motivating all candidates and diverse candidates to apply. So the ideal job posting are only 1/3 bullet points. They're about 600 to 700 words, and less than 300 words actually get the fewest applications. So another interesting evidence-based point to go back to your job postings, take a look, how long are they, and try to increase those numbers of qualified candidates. Transparency. Let's talk a little bit about that. What we heard in our roundtables was that it's difficult to attract women to sawmill locations and other forest sector jobs. So I want to show how being transparent can help solve this problem. Because when we're transparent, we're communicating fairness and belonging. And you can think about your friendships actually, and to see how important this is. When we as individuals are transparent and we're open, then we will build those friendships with other people. And the same holds true with organizations. The more transparent, the more open we are, the more we'll be able to build our relationships with our candidates, with our employees, with our community, with our suppliers. So really try to embed transparency in your organization in a variety of different ways. An example of transparency when it comes to job applications was this kind of really large study that a field experiment that was done. And so what they did is they showed the number of applicants on a job posting. They were trying to get more women to apply to STEM jobs in this particular case by being really transparent. So they showed the number of applicants. Now, they did an experiment. Half the applicants didn't see anything and half did see the number. What happened? They got more women applied when it was transparent. When they could see the number of applicants, they had more women apply. Now, oddly or interestingly, there was no difference in the number of men that applied in either one of those groups, but women really did. They appreciated the less ambiguity, the more transparency. So it's potentially an easy thing to change, and it could increase the number of women applying. That's an example of a small nudge, a small change. You also want to present your benefit and salary options. Job ads with benefit and salary information increase the number and caliber of qualified applicants. And you also want to present opportunities for growth and mastery on your job postings. Another way to be transparent that does make a difference is if you communicate salary negotiable. When you communicate salary negotiable, and of course do that with, there's actually, that allows women the permission to do that. And that has decreased the gender pay gap by 45% in some organizations, just by allowing people to negotiate salary. And you may be negotiating salary anyway, but just making it really obvious increases people's sense of belonging, increases their sense of autonomy, and ultimately decreases that gender gap for you as well. Okay, diversity statements. Okay, so, you know, since 1996 with the Employment Equity Act, organizations have, it's been necessary for companies to have formal policies and diversity statements. Some of them are compliance driven, and some of them communicate more on what their organization is doing, what kind of actions that they are doing. The question that we have though is, do diversity statements on job advertisements actually mean anything on who actually gets hired? The answer is kind of yes and no. First, diversity statements can increase the number of qualified candidates. So here's an example from an organization called NVIDIA, which is a tech organization. They use Textio, that augmented writing platform that I talked about earlier, and they wrote a diversity statement on their job ads. Then they ran an experiment. Some applicants saw the statement and some did not see the statement. There was an increase from 21% without diversity statements to 38% with diversity statements of qualified candidates. So they can absolutely work when they're written in a very transparent kind of way. Adding a diversity statement, we know as well, is a powerful nudge to get diverse candidates to apply. Several studies have been done around this as well. And it's all experimental kind of studies, which is really what we want to be doing when we're talking about human behavior. When you share an explicit interest in diversity that is backed by objective hiring processes that you're actually doing in-house, this can increase represented groups' likelihood of applying. When you have a diversity statement as well, diverse groups are more likely to identify themselves fully in when they present themselves. So what happens sometimes is that diverse candidates are actually whitening their resume. They're taking off their name, they're taking off, you know, any kind of affiliation with an organization, a diverse organization. They're taking off anything that it can be used, they know can be used in a discriminatory way. Unconsciously, we are all biased and people know that. So they whiten their resume. When people see a diversity statement, however, they don't. They trust the organization, which is awesome. But what is happening is unless your internal processes are actually mitigating bias and interrupting bias, it's working against that candidate because they're whitening their resume, they're trusting, then they're actually getting to the organization where those unconscious biases are playing in. So what you want to do is actually look at your processes and then be more confident that your diversity statements are actually getting to those diverse candidates. And so there is that caveat. Sonia Kang, if you're interested, I'm happy to share this research paper around this particular topic on the power of diversity statements, or look it up online. She's based out of the University of Toronto and does work specifically around diversity statements and how, although we intend them to be really positive, they can actually be harmful for our efforts and also for that diverse candidate as well. So just be careful around that.
So Sylvia, on that point, so a diversity statement will help people not whiten the resume, show up as who they are in all their diversity, but there's problems when they enter a workforce where there is unconscious bias. And so is the solution to that then to connect the dots to have unconscious bias training? Like, what's the solution to that challenge? Would you?
So the solution would be a lot of the stuff that we talked about last time, which is really how do we, and also what we're going to talk about, you know, next time too, around how do we design our process, our recruitment process, so that we interrupt those bias. Because in that moment of making a decision, we can't actually see our biases. So we can get trained, but awareness training would only do so much. We have to design our process so that we're interrupting that bias and helping people to align their intentions with their actions.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks for making the connection to the last webinar, because I thought that was also covered there, and then to future ones. That's perfect, thank you.
Yeah, it's all this this idea of, again, we have unconscious biases. We're not going to be able to do too much about that because we're human. But we can design so that we help people, because most people want to make objective decisions. Okay,
great. And I just wanted to point out that we have 6 minutes left as well. Okay.
Exactly. Okay, so the next one is really around designing candidate-centric outreach strategies. So we heard from our roundtable that, you know, uncertainty about where to find Indigenous candidates. I've listed some job boards here, and so certainly post forest sector jobs on job boards that will better attract your target groups, but also work in partnership with the local Indigenous communities to design outreach strategies that meet their BAM needs. And so we talked about that human-centered approach to get people involved in crafting a job position, for example, and listening to what their BAM needs are, so that we can better have that outreach strategy around that. The last one that I want to point out is highlighting your workplace experience. So what we want to do is communicate what is it going to be like once people come and work for you. So as part of your outreach strategy, provide applicants a realistic preview of their day-to-day experience on the job before they start. So for example, a day in the life handouts at youth career fairs. Tell applicants about a day in the life in the forest sector and how they will make an impact and add value. Because candidates are looking for more than just a list of tasks. They're also looking to grow and to learn and be part of an inclusive company culture. So I'll leave it at that. We have a few minutes left for some questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Sylvia. We did have one come into the chat, and in the meantime, if you do have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A. But we had one question come in from Joanne, and it was about the whole notion of transparency. You had mentioned having the number of applicants being advertised on that job posting. The question here is, if the number of applicants is really high, does that detract from the number of applicants? So would women be afraid to apply if there are too many?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and the answer is no. I mean, the clarity and the less ambiguity is actually sort of the positive around that. So you would think that, oh, you know, there's a lot of applicants, I'm not going to have a good chance, but that's actually the opposite effect. So no, it wouldn't matter on the number.
Thanks for that. And I have a question as well. And Zach, interrupt me if someone else comes on with a question. It's that you had mentioned, oh, you should show the salary. So at SFI, and we're pretty intentional about not showing the salary only for one reason. We're interested in the skills and the culture fit, and not necessarily in the level. So we may hire a coordinator, a manager, or even a director for some positions. It's more, we're looking for, you know, do they have the capacity to do this or to learn to do this? And are they a strong culture fit? And so we don't do that. And or it's rare that we do, let's just say that. And so is it just more important to be explicit, back to your point of negotiation, if you're not going to include the actual salary, to just say the position level and the salary is negotiable? Well, is that a workaround?
So in your case, because because it is actually open along levels, that's different. And so I'd answer the second part of your question is yes. So, you know, have that negotiable piece. And that first bit about to show the salary was really around, you have a job that's a manager job, not this is the kind of person, and that we're willing to, if you are willing to do that, then communicate that, be as transparent as you can.
Thank you.
Excellent. On that note as well, I had one more question for you, Sylvia.
Yeah.
And on the slide around increasing transparency, there was a point there in the solutions that talked about presenting opportunities for growth and mastery. And I'm just thinking about the previous question that Kathy had there, and really thinking about growing into positions potentially and growth through positions. So I was wondering if you could provide a couple examples of what you mean by presenting those opportunities for growth or mastery. Is it soft skills? Are they tangible certification or training programs? Like, what's effective there? So
if we go back to that BAM need of mastery, right? And people want to feel confident in their job, and people want to know that they're going to continually learn. So what I would be thinking about is, in this position, what would that young person be interested to continue to learn in this position? And I would make sure that I communicate all of those things, regardless of what they are, in that posting as well. So, you know, we value our employees' growth, and, you know, whatever that looks like, as far as we customize a learning program with you, we provide these soft skills, we mentor, whatever those are that you're doing, is to communicate those so that people understand that right from the get-go.
Awesome.
Thank you.
We are coming up to 11:30 here, so I hadn't seen any more questions come in. So on that note, diversity and inclusion is an ongoing process. I myself personally have been learning a lot as we go through this webinar series, and we're only halfway there. We have 2 more to go. If there are any questions or comments that you'd like to make to us, please don't hesitate to reach out to either myself or Paul Robitaille, our Manager of Indigenous and Youth Relations. We'd be happy to hear your thoughts. Our next webinar is on July 8th, and it goes to the next step in this process of after you've recruited after you've had applicants apply to these positions, how do you incorporate these D&I principles into those hiring decisions? And so we'll be going through different aspects like, do panel interviews work, or what is the most useful job criteria? So stay tuned. It's going to be building on the information we've already presented. And in the meantime, if there's anything you really want to see in the next webinar around hiring processes, we'll be sending a survey shortly. And really that's an opportunity for you to help guide the conversation about what you want to see in the following webinar. So stay tuned for that. We'll be sending it out shortly. And with that, I want to thank you all for attending today. Really, it's through this participation in this webinar series that you're helping to grow diverse future forest and conservation leaders. And when everyone can see themselves in these jobs, I think is a really great day for us. So with that, I'll bring this to a close, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you.